The future of the GOP is continuing to take shape after Congresswoman Liz Cheney lost her House leadership position. That move deepened former President Trump's hold on the party. But not all Republicans are on board. More than 100 Republicans, including some former elected officials, released a letter shortly after Ms. Cheney's removal. They're threatening to form a breakaway party if the GOP cannot move on from Donald Trump. We've been a country of two major parties for a long time, but not always these two major parties. Back in the 1850s, U.S. politics were dominated by the Democratic Party and the Whig Party. In 1853, the Whigs had the White House with President Millard Fillmore. Remember him? 2 years later, the party fell apart over an ideological split on slavery. That allowed the Republican Party to ascend and elect Abraham Lincoln president. Now let's back up a second. The GOP is far from dissolving. Polls show most members do support Donald Trump, at least broadly. But will the party stay the course and purge his opponents? Or is history about to repeat itself? Let's discuss it with Allan Lichtman, a distinguished professor of history at American University in Washington. Professor Lichtman, good to see you again. Good evening. Welcome.
Thank you. Great to be with you again.
How apt is this comparison between the Republican Party and the Whig Party? I feel like there are some similarities in terms of how ideology and policy kind of collided to cause this split, but I don't want to read too much into it.
Yeah, history never moves in straight lines, but there are some very important lessons from the collapse of the Whig Party, which imploded from within over the burning issue of the time, the issue of slavery. But the common wisdom is wrong. The Republican Party did not immediately arise out of the ashes of the Whig Party. Rather, two competing parties emerged in the middle of the 1850s. One of them was the American Party, better known as the Know-Nothing Party, because they didn't want to admit that they were members. This was a nativist party built upon lies about the dangers allegedly posed by immigrants and Catholics to the American political system. Then you had the Republican Party built upon truths about the dangers of slavery and based upon the principle that they should oppose the expansion of slavery. It was only after the Republican Party came in second to James Buchanan's Democrats in 1856 and the American Party a distant third that the modern political system of Republicans and Democrats emerged. Now, there are many lessons that we can draw from that to the modern situation favoring the Republican Party. Much like the two parties that emerged from the ashes of the Whig Party, we have within the Republican Party a faction based upon lies and division. The Republican Party has drawn a line in the sand. You have to believe the big lie that Trump really won the presidential election to be a bona fide Republican, and you have to accept his divisive politics, much like the Know-Nothing Party of the 1850s. Then you have another wing of the Republican Party based upon the truth that, in fact, the election was perfectly legitimate. Joe Biden won, and the Republican Party needs to rebuild on principle. But here are two critical differences. As you point out, the Republican Party is not evenly divided. The part that's based on a lie is overwhelmingly dominant within the leadership and dominant within the rank and file again. Plus, it is vastly more difficult today to form a new party. It would take billions of dollars to really compete nationally or for the presidency as a new party. And the problem is the donors won't give unless the new party can prove it can win, but it can't prove it can win without the donations.
Right. Well, and that's, Professor, that's one of the other differences that I think about with this. The parallels and the differences, the parallel feels like that ideological split in terms of a party saying, well, wait a minute, we said we were one thing, now we're doing something else, who do we want to be? And the Republican Party being able to make an appeal to values and say, what they're doing is wrong, what we're trying to do is morally right, come support us, and thus they were able to rise. But This is a different political day. Like, you could walk up to the White House and talk to Abe Lincoln back when he became president in the 1860s. You can't just kind of like wander into the West Wing right now. It's not the same political universe. And I feel like the way that we articulate our values politically is very different. Even just the way we talk about what the GOP is or should be, the way we message what a party is or should be, has taken a quantum leap since the 1850s.
Well, government has taken a quantum leap. Politics has become vastly more complicated, vastly more expensive. But I will say the demise of the Republican Party, if it happens, and I'm not predicting that, is not so much going to come out of the rise of a robust new party, but that the Republican Party could become today's know-nothing party, a party based on a lie that most Americans don't accept, but only their most fervent adherents accept. And that could lead to the Republican Party not necessarily being split in half, but losing and draining political power over time. That's the real danger for the Republican Party. You can't appeal to the American people based on a lie and based on divisions. That's why the Republican Party is so vigorously trying to suppress the vote, because they know they can rule only as a minority party.
In our last few seconds, before I have to let you go, I always try to note that we are a party that is a plurality, if not at times a majority, a country. Independents, not just Democrats or Republicans, but independents are a significant core of the electorate. How does that change the way we view this historically? Were we always a country that had so many people who were like, no, thanks, I'm good, I don't really need to join either party before we go?
No, 19th century politics was very much aligned along party lines. In fact, until late in the century, you didn't even have official state ballots. You had party ballots. But the problem for Republicans is, on what basis are they now appealing to independents who, for the most part, don't buy the big lie?
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.